Hello everyone, Trophy Wine Hunter. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm really excited to bring you a video on the new developments with Chianti Classico. I attended a seminar that was put on by the Chianti Classico Consortium, who came to town to kind of promote the new things that are happening with Chianti Classico. And the big thing for them is now they are starting in 2027 with what they call UGAs, or Additional Geographic Units. I'm not going to even try to pronounce it in Italian. So I'm going to go through my notes on this, but it's very important that we as consumers get ahead of the game. I was so pleased that I was invited to this seminar so I can share that information with viewers and subscribers and get ahead of this. So let's get to Chianti Classico. Is a region that I'm sure most people are very familiar with. It is mostly of the Sangiovese grape. If they grow other grape varietals, they cannot be called Chianti Classico, and they will become IGT wines or sometimes Super Tuscan wines. But Chianti Classico has had a bit of a reputation for value, and maybe a bad reputation, which they're really changing, and they're really trying to change. This idea of the Super Tuscans rebelling, that's in the 80s, and that's 50 years ago. That's in the past. Chianti Classico has now made room for these IGT wines, and that's great that they have great wines, but the heart of Tuscany is Sangiovese still. Chianti Classico has really changed. If you drank Chianti Classicos in the 80s and the 90s and this high alcohol kind of low quality value type stuff, that's totally out the door. And in general, I mean, there's still some value producers, but in general, the quality of Chianti Classico has gone up tremendously in the last 10, 15 years, and it will continue to rise. And those days that we're talking about them, pushing back against international varietals, that's 50 years ago. That's history. So we got to get over that and kind of get over this idea that Chianti Classico is not good. And that's part of my rethinking of Chianti Classico also. The consortium was actually founded in 1924, and 2024 marked the 100-year anniversary of the consortium. One of the big things they did in 2014 was create the Grand Selezione level. And that was a big thing because that was a higher quality of Chianti Classico. So Chianti Classicos are wines that are aged 1 year, and that represents about 55% of all Chianti Classico wines. Reserva wines are aged for 2 years, and that represents 40% of all Chianti Classico wines. And then we have the Grand Selezione, which only accounts for 5% of production. The minimum aging for Grand Selezione is 30 months of aging, 3 months in oak. It's interesting to note that there is no stipulation with Chianti Classico or Reserva as to how long you age it in oak. Prior to July 1st, 2023, the rules for Sangiovese allowed for, you can call yourself Chianti if you had a minimum of 80% Sangiovese grapes. The new rules after July 1st, 2023 for Grand Selezione wines is that now, instead of having the same rules as Chianti Classico and Reserva, now you have to have a minimum of 90% Sangiovese grapes in the blend, and the other 10% you can only use indigenous varietals. So you cannot use grape varietals like Merlot in the blend. It must be indigenous grape varietals, and there are 8 of them. So starting with the 2027 vintage, they're going to be able to have these Additional Geographical Units, or UGAs, on the bottle. So it's a similar but not the same, and they pointed this out very clearly. It's not Cru. We're not talking about Grand Cru, and we're not even talking about the MGAs in Barolo, which are kind of more equivalent to Cru regions in Burgundy, France. With Barolo, the MGAs, I think there's over 100. With these UGAs, there's only 11 in the whole area of Chianti, and Chianti is much larger than the Barolo region. So it's more like a region, and there is kind of some sense, although they don't want to emphasize this, that because each of those areas is quite large, but there's still a sense of a community, some underlying kind of bond with calling these different regions. And I think that's a trend that you see with most places now, most wine regions and most wine people. They want to kind of go dive into the different regions. It's not that it's better than Chianti Classico or Chianti Reserva that's going to be taken from more, that allows you to take from different regions in Chianti. It's just a different spin on things. I've never thought of single vineyard Barolos as better than blended Barolos from a whole region, but it's just a different way of tasting. They are generally more expensive, and that's what you can expect with these UGAs, in my opinion. Gran Selezione UGAs in 2011 will be priced higher. And so from a consumer perspective, since I'm giving you this knowledge, I would expect Gran Selezione wines to go up in price quite a bit, like over the $100 mark. So from a consumer perspective, I would think you should buy Gran Selezione wines until 2027 because they are going to go up in price. I almost guarantee you that. Couple of things I learned in the seminar was put on by a person called Michaela Morris, who's very well known in our community as a wine educator. She had a great seminar. Is that with Chianti, it's funny because you think that you would think that the most northerly properties are going to be the coolest and the most southern properties are going to be the hottest. But the way that Chianti is structured, there's 3 ridges that basically underlie in the middle. So the hottest places actually in Chianti are actually around the edges of Chianti. And in fact, the middle of Chianti is a little bit slightly cooler. When we were tasting these wines, I did feel that there was a difference when we tasted the separate UGAs between the hotter area UGAs and the cooler areas. And my personal taste preference, I actually liked the hotter areas. I liked those a lot more. I felt they were a little bit more robust. They had a little bit more intensity of flavor. I liked the tannin structure. I liked the fruit profile a little bit more than the cooler areas of the Chianti, which were more ethereal, a little bit more floral, lighter in style from my perspective. And again, it's a different taste preference. So going to the map of the different regions of Chianti Classico, I preferred the wines coming from the San Cascano, the Greve, the Gaoli, and then the Castellina. So these are what we would call hotter regions because they're around the edges. And I found that quite interesting. But to me, it was a great seminar because I've been a big fan of Gran Selezione. I think Gran Selezione to me is a higher level. I know it doesn't mean, like Chianti Classico has its place, Chianti Reserva has its place, but I really enjoy Chianti Classico because I do like the extended oak aging, extended aging, and I do enjoy the intensity of flavors, and I enjoy the quality of the wine. I think the UGAs, although they don't want to emphasize that it's a better or an upper level, I think it will, by its nature, drive the market upwards in terms of quality and therefore pricing, because you're going to, again, increase the standard that you require to make the wine, which is up to 90%, and it has to be indigenous grapes or localized grapes that you use. So that's going to give you even more character of Tuscany. I think they're trying to go back to old school, but with new technology. So nothing wrong with Chianti in terms of the region. It was just, it got overpopulated with producers that were into producing kind of value wines. And they thought the value market was what they wanted to do. They, much like Beaujolais, how the Beaujolais is marketed. You'll see now Beaujolais is marketing Beaujolais Village. And they're saying, hey, we can make, you know, very affordable wines, but we can also make great wines too. And I think that's the same thing where Chianti Classico is coming from. Their consortium is saying, yeah, we can make like really affordable wines, but we can really make great wines too. And in fact, there is a bit of a undervalued element because people are not used to high-end Chianti Classico wines. And Gran Selezione is a step in that process, and UGA is another step in this process. Most Chianti, like really good Chianti Gran Seleziones, are still under $100. I mean, that's kind of, if you look at it, any other top shelf wine of any other region would not be like that. So it is, in a way, I think, undervalued. And I think if you go back to this video in 5 years' time, where I tell you to buy Gran Selezione wines now, I think you'll do very well. And I don't think you'll regret it. I think the quality will continue to increase. There will be more and more emphasis at this upper level. Almost every winemaker, I think, will try to make a flagship Gran Selezione or UGA wine for a certain region that they're in. And I think those prices will appreciate, and scores of those wines will also be quite high in the 95 point and above region. I don't think it's a stretch to say that we will see a UGA wine, a Gran Selezione Chianti Classico UGA wine, in the top 10 of Wine Spectator magazine, probably, give it a couple years, 2029. You'll see it quite regularly in there because it's going to provide great value. I think your window is going to be about 10 years, because it usually takes 10 years for people to grab onto something. But I'm giving you early notice. You can grab on before most people even realize that they're changing this. So I hope this is going to be useful to people. Again, I think Gran Selezione, if you're drinking Chianti Classico, is where it's at. And I think the way to really appreciate Chianti Classico wines is with food. Please do not just drink them sipping on the patio. That's not what they're like. They've got great acidity. They've got a great herb notes to it, and red fruit and black fruits. Perfect with food, particularly Italian food. Tomato sauces, great well with them. Lots of pastas. Those will go well with them. So I really encourage you to get on the train before it leaves the station. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Until next time, happy drinking.